And good morning. Thank you for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. You're listening or watching, depending on what mode you're using. Tamara Scott Live with Truth for Our Time. We have an interesting show for you today. I'm excited myself to see how it's going to work out. We have first online on tap, and I want to get right to her, Deb Thornton. You recognize Deb Thornton's name if you're from Iowa, but also if you're from around the country. Public Interest Institute is a well-known national policy organization, and so we're so blessed to have Deb with us because she's calling in overseas, and she's on a mission right now outside of our country, so I want to talk to her, but also later in the show, taxfoundation.org, we'll be talking with someone from that organization on your Tax Freedom Day, which is not as late as it has been some years, but it's not as early as it has been in other years, and still something you need to be concerned about. You're still working from this point in the year to fund the government. Your paycheck is still going to the government. It's deceitful that you get to take one home and cash it because it's still going to the government. That little pieces that they take out through FICA and all those other acronyms that get their hands on their money before you do. And then Jenny Beth Martin with the Tea Party Patriots will be joining us. We have a great event happening this Saturday, April 12th. April 12th, Airport Holiday Inn, Tea Party event. And you can go onto the Facebook and get information on that, Tea Party Patriots. I'll have to see how we can hook you up, make sure that I think I've got that on my line. I'll try and get that during a break, make sure we have that information for you as to how you can get reservations in for the Tea Party Patriots. Our Iowa Tea Party Patriot, Greg Cumming, is very helpful in getting that set up and arranged here in Iowa. Great opportunity. Jenny Beth Martin will be talking about messaging that works with us later in the show today. Let's go to Deb Thornton. Deb, thanks for joining us across the ocean.
Thanks, Tamara. Glad to be here.
So tell our viewers, our listeners first, what are you doing outside the United States?
I am currently in Monrovia, Liberia, which is the capital of Liberia. We're on the west coast of Africa on sort of the elephant ear that sticks out. And my husband is here with his job, and the family has come to be with him.
And is all of your family together?
Yes, we're all here.
What a great experience for you. But you are still keeping your pulse, your fingers on the pulse right here in America. I know you're still writing and keeping us up to date and actually keeping us educated. Deb, I wanted to talk today about Tax Day coming up, April 15th. Specifically, Iowa. What's the fiscal state of Iowa? How are we doing?
Well, we're doing pretty well compared to some other states, but certainly not as well as I and I know other fiscal conservatives would like us to do. The Mercatus Center at George Mason University, which is in Arlington, Virginia, is doing quite a bit of work with a libertarian conservative sort of viewpoint, looking at the fiscal situation of the country and the states and giving us an analysis and going through that data for everybody. And they're doing some really good work with very good information.
And so we know in Iowa, we're at least, how are we doing financially?
Great. The most recent report, which just came out in January from Mercatus, they've ranked the state fiscal conditions on four categories, and those are cash, budget, long-run financial condition, and service level requirement, something they call service level requirement. And Iowa's doing very well. We're in the top 20 on the cash, budget, and long-run financial condition information. The main concern on the long-run financial condition is, of course, the state pensions, which we've written on. I think you've talked about before that the state pension system for state government employees is somewhat underfunded and needs some further reforms. And so that's the main concern there. But their fourth category, what they're calling service level requirements, they try to analyze the level of service the state government is providing us for the money we pay. And it's an efficiency. It's a measure of sort of government efficiency.
Okay.
And on that one, unfortunately, Iowa is not doing very well. We rank way down at 34th out of the 50 states.
And so what does that mean to Iowans? What do we need to, how do we fix that?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to do just as citizens and your listeners is be aware of it and highlight it and talk about it. In terms of government efficiency, the two biggest items in the state budget are education and health care. You know, the Medicaid, the Medicare, the health care issues. And the number one is the education budget. And we have to really ask the hard questions and insist on how is our education money being spent. I think we're all pretty well the fact that the achievement level for Iowa K-12 students has been pretty flat for the last 10, 15, 20 years, while other states their children are doing better on test scores and achieving more. And ours is flat. So I think we have to insist, we have to follow up with the legislature and the governor on some of their education reform initiatives, follow up with our local school boards and say, how are you spending the money? Are we getting the most bang for our buck for our tax dollar? Because according to this ranking and what's going on in other states, we're not getting as much as we should.
And I'm going to ask you something, and I don't know if this is out of your purview or not, Deb. It just seems to me we give so much money, I think 69 cents of every dollar, over 60 cents of every dollar goes to education here in the state of Iowa. And I'm not even sure if that may even include our federal education as well. But my question is, would we be better off if we kept the money in state, kept the money locally, and held our local school officials accountable, rather than sending it to D.C. and getting a portion of it back?
Right. And that 55 to 60% figure includes kind of the money that comes back and the straight tax dollars, because most of our education funding does come from our state, you know, even though things go to the federal government and come back. And yes, I think we're better off to keep it at the local level. Certainly, I'm an advocate for school choice, for enhanced school choice, because that is one good way to hold the schools accountable. That if your child is not achieving the way you think they should be, you know, pull them out and send them under an education savings account, under a open enrollment, under a charter school kind of thing, to a school that will provide better services for them for the money that you're spending. And that's a big thing. One of our education problems in Iowa that is a sensitive topic is the fact that we still have so many school districts. We have 99 counties and something like 365 individual school districts, which all have, superintendents, assistant superintendents, assistant to the assistant superintendents, a lot of overhead. The area education agencies have significant overhead, very expensively paid people in those area education agencies. And I'm not sure, and these numbers from Arcadis back that up, that we're getting the most efficient service we can get for our money through those systems.
Now, I have to say, I know you've written several papers on this, and folks, you can find those papers. Public Interest Institute is the name of the policy organization, Public Interest Institute. But if you go on to limitedgovernment.org, you'll find a lot of these papers that Deborah Thornton has written, along with several others from this organization. And Deb, I don't know how easy this is for you calling in overseas, but if your game, our next week's show is on STOs, Education Savings Accounts, and School Choice. And we have a couple people in Iowa who'll be sitting with us in studio, but if you can give us another 5 or 10 minutes, I'd love to have you take folks through that educational choice.
Sure. I'd be glad to, Samara. It's not bad. We get 5 cents a minute to call to the States from over here, so it's not too bad, and we're only 4 hours ahead of you all time. Well, 5 hours, I guess, Central Time to Iowa, 5 hours time frame. It is not too bad, and I'll be glad to call in at any point. And generally, the cell connection is pretty good. Sometimes you get delay, but generally it's pretty good.
Yeah, no, this is terrific.
We generally have pretty good internet service, and the only problem is we occasionally lose electricity because it's all generator powered.
I can't imagine.
It's sometimes a little tricky with those generators.
Are you on
But
Twitter so our listeners could follow you on Twitter?
not on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, just under my name, under Deborah Thornton, and I've posted a lot of pictures there from being here in Africa, and still post updates on various sundry topics. And certainly school choice is one that's close to my heart.
Absolutely. So we'll look forward to having you come back on that. Coming back to the state's fiscal responsibility, the fiscal situation right now. And I know a while back, I think we had one state employee to every, was it 11 population residents of Iowa? And
Right.
I think that's gotten better. Do you know what the recent numbers are on that?
It's about 11 to 12. I mean, it varies year to year, but 11 to 12 is a pretty good talking figure. And the main problem with the state government employees is we are on a defined benefit pension system. And these defined benefit pensions, there was some underfunding in the early 2000s and late 1900s. And then certainly the market collapse in 2008, 2009 made those pensions very, very short. And because it is defined benefit, the promise that's made to those employees must be met. And right now, the Iowa pension system is at about 80% funding over a 30-year period, and that is what the industry considers acceptable. I don't necessarily think that's good enough. I mean, it's okay, but it's not good enough. And I'd certainly like to see the legislature look at reforming that system so that we switch to more of a defined contribution system, much like an IRA or a 401k that you might have in the private sector, where once the taxpayer money is put into those pensions, then the taxpayer long-term 20, 30, 40-year obligation is dealt with. We don't have this burden hanging on over our children, because the teenagers of today will be the ones that will have to make sure that these pensions 30 years from now are paid. And if the money's not there, they'll have to pay additional tax money at that time. And that's just a huge risk for taxpayers, a huge liability that I'd like to see us move away from. And that certainly would enhance the overall state fiscal condition.
And what is the tax burden on every Iowan? Is that something we can figure out right now? Did I see that in one of your papers?
I got that number somewhere. I don't know if
I think I saw
have it
500.
In terms of the long-term outstanding liability, I would say it's at least 500. I don't think it's 1,000, but and it's better than for many states. The state of Illinois, with the pension burden, their pension liability is something like $2,500 a person in Illinois, because their pension system is in such horrible shape.
So when we compare ourselves to Illinois, we look pretty good. How do we look compared to the other states around us?
On the pension issues?
Or on any of the financial issues. And here I have it right here. The last time we reported on this in September 2012, I was ranked 8th in the nation. Our financial burden per taxpayer was $500. Deb, that just doesn't sound very much.
Compared to some, it's better. If we're 8th in the nation, it's better than most. It's not good enough. It'd be nice to be first in the nation with the lowest taxpayer burden of all. And certainly, I think that the folks, the Iowa House of Representatives, is trying to hold the line and trying to work with, of course, the Senate to not increase spending so that it's so onerous on folks. And that's a critical issue. The House of Representatives keeps trying to hold the line on the budget increases. I mean, we're at a $7 billion budget now in the state of Iowa, so it's a lot of money, and it has gone up significantly since in the last 5-6 years.
Even with Republican leadership, we now are still increasing our budget. Not as much as we would be likely with Democrat leadership, but we could still tighten the strings, I think, a little tighter.
Yes, we certainly could. And one issue is that with the surplus that we have in the state budget right now, this year on our taxes, as everybody goes to file their taxes, there's a non-refundable tax credit that each taxpayer gets, and I believe it's something like $60 per person that they've put in for this year as a non-refundable tax credit. Now, we don't get that money back, but it comes off the taxes we potentially owe. And they did that because of last year's budget surplus. Certainly that number could probably be higher. And we are in a surplus situation with the state budget. And my position, and I know many of your listeners, would be that, no, my family, I'd like to keep that money in my pocket to do with it as I see fit, not to send it to the government, but for me to use it for my child's tennis shoes, for my child's clothing and education, and my family's vehicles and food and housing, rather than send it off to the government.
And I think that's where we're at. A lot of families are struggling. Governor Huckabee was in town last night and told a story about a woman he saw put only $5 of gas in her car. And obviously that wasn't just because that's all she needed. That was all she could afford at that point. And so Deb, you raise a great point. We deserve the authority, the decision-making power of how we spend our dollars, rather than having it go to the state and they decide how they're going to spend it. And we always hear of programs where they can always, I've never seen a state really come back and say, we're just going to cut this because it doesn't make sense anymore. As you raised the area education associations, a great deal of concern for a lot of folks in education, not sure what those organizations even do anymore in the education system. So there are a lot of ways we could cut the fat, so to speak. This surplus you're talking about, this is taxpayer dollars. It's too much that's been taken. And so here's my other question. We're being hit with a possible tax increase on gasoline, a gas tax. Is there something that they could take this surplus and help with those bridges, help with the road fees, that we wouldn't have to have this tax? And we don't need this tax increase, by the way. Just because that's the only constitutionally protected tax that it goes to the roads, that doesn't mean that's the only money they can put on roads. A forward-thinking legislature can plan to put more money with that tax from the gases and redo our roads. But Deb, can we take the surplus money?
And yes, I think we certainly could. If the legislature would decide to do so, there's almost $1 billion in surplus from the last year budget. Certainly things that people are concerned about, such as the bridges. And there's a little bit of a hype about the bridges, but they're not really in as bad a shape as some folks would have you believe. But those are in many cases, very long-term fixes. You fix a bridge today and it's good for another 30, 40 years kind of thing. So certainly I think you could take some of the surplus, target it very tightly and very closely to where there is a critical need. And I think the state transportation folks can certainly identify those. And you could use that money to address some very specific things. What you have when you increase the gas tax is it just then becomes perpetual. And that, I think, is part of the problem of increasing the gas taxes. Okay, we need money now for X specific things, but once you institute that sort of tax, it does just go on and on and on. And then the next thing you know, 5 years from now, somebody wants to increase it again, and 5 years from now, somebody wants to increase it again. So I think, again, that's where we have to look at efficiencies. And certainly a different area that's gotten some publicity recently is the review of the Regent universities and the review committee that they're doing to look at potential efficiencies and potential budget areas within Iowa State, and UNI as to where we could save taxpayer money, because there's a lot of money and a lot of overhead. I think a lot of inefficiencies within the school systems, those university systems. So that's kind of what this Mercatus report gets to, is trying to effectively and efficiently spend the money that we are currently using and get more bang for our buck.
Well, we're thankful that there are organizations out there studying such. We're very thankful for the Public Interest Institute. Deborah Thornton is my guest right now, and she writes about a lot of this. I'm looking at the 2014 brief, volume 21, number 11, What is the State's Fiscal Condition? And then the most recent one Deb is talking about is this one that has the Mercatus center study on it, and ranks us among states, which is interesting to know in this election year, and good for everyone to be discussing with the candidates as you're at those forums and you're talking at the the legislative coffees. You should be asking these questions and talking to those who want to serve you in public office as to how they will best make most efficient use of the least amount of your tax dollars as possible. Deb, how can people follow or find? I know there's transparency.org, there's limitedgovernment.org. How can they say, put me on your list?
The best thing to do is to go to limitedgovernment.org, and you can sign up there. You can also call down to the main office at 319-385-3462 and give them your name and address. Certainly we appreciate donating members, but can certainly sign up and, get them your name, your email, your address, and start getting our material. And at limitedgovernment.org, everything's available there. And we do the monthly briefs, and then we do quarterly reports, the Iowa Economic Scorecard, Facts and Opinions, Limits, which talks about limiting government, and then our quarterly policy studies, where we go more in depth on various issues. And we'd love to have them sign up.
And the thing that our listeners and viewers need to know is it's not a big, hefty book that you have to wade through. These are policy papers, easily readable in one quick flash, and information that you can store or hit delete once you've read it and move forward. But it's good for you to have and be accessible to. Deb Thornton, thank you for joining me today. I'll look very, very forward to having you back next week as we talk about education's savings accounts, choices in education, the options, and what that does economically and educationally for our kids.
Thank you very much. Tamara is doing good work out there, and we appreciate the support.
Deborah Thornton, even staying with us, keeping us abreast of the issues from Moravia, Liberia. Great to have her with us. We're going to go to a break right now. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. I am Tamara Scott with Truth for Our Time, and we are powered by webcast1live.com.
Get away from us, you neat old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit, you're our hero!
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart. And it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
All across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
Well, thanks for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. We are talking about tax day. It is April 9th here, but this is our last show before April 15th. And you all know what day that is. It's the day you have to have your taxes paid. And so we just got done talking with Deb Thornton. She writes for limitedgovernment.org, Public Interest Institute. great information for you there. But taxfoundation.org is another good organization to get information from, and they've been talking about Tax Freedom Day, which is different than tax due day of filing, tax filing day. And so joining me is Lyman Stone. And so he's going to be talking to us a little bit about these issues, and we're just going to find out where we're at as a nation. And as we talk with Deb, where Iowa ranks with the other states, we'll maybe go into detail on that as well. Lyman, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
And for our listeners, tell them your title.
I'm an economist at the Tax Foundation's Center for State Tax Policy. So we focus on specifically tax issues relating to state and local governments.
And how long has Tax Foundation been around, taxfoundation.org?
Oh, well, we were founded in 1937, so I guess that's 77 years now.
My
Going on
goodness.
77 years.
Here, I thought you were probably one of those organizations that's come around in the last 10, 20, 30 years since we've kind of gone overboard with taxing of the public and our big programs and our big government growth.
We're the oldest think tank in D.C., and we were founded during the Great Depression, and we've been providing reliable or principled research, insightful analysis, and engaged expert opinion ever since.
Well, interesting and good to know, and I guess it does fit that you would have come in during the Depression. Tell me, were tax rates during the Depression high compared to what they are now, since we were all so broke, or were?
Well, I'm on here to talk about Tax Freedom Day, and we actually track that through Tax Freedom Day. So Tax Freedom Day is the day when America as a whole has earned enough to pay its total tax bill for the year. So that's state, local, federal taxes, every kind. And in 1900, Tax Freedom Day would have come about January 22nd. So people were done paying for the cost of government sometime in January. That figure rose consistently up into the 1970s. When it arrived at roughly its current position in late April. But yeah, during the 1930s, we saw Tax Freedom Day moving consistently later in the year as especially the federal government claimed a larger and larger share of people's incomes.
And of course, we think it probably happened as well that when government really expanded under FDR and the big government programs, the bureaucracies grew. I think the history books say by some 2 million employees they grew. So today, Tax Freedom Day is April 21st.
Yes, which is 3 days later than last year. And that's mostly because of the economic recovery. Interestingly enough, when the economy is doing very well, when people are realizing a lot of capital gains and unemployment is low and people have high incomes, the federal government claims a larger share of their income because of the progressive income tax and the nature of business taxation. So in good times, the government revenues really spike upwards even more than income. And then in bad times, like in a recession, government revenues fall even lower. So that they can be very volatile. So we saw that a few years ago was the earliest Tax Freedom Day we've had since the 60s, but then now we're back up to where we've been around since the 70s.
And how early was that one since the 60s?
In 2009, Tax Freedom Day was April 10th, and that's the earliest it's been in a long time.
All right, I'm going to ask you something. In 2000, it was late again. I think it was maybe even into May.
Yes, indeed. In 2000, it was May 1st. That's the latest it's ever been. And that we attribute to several things. One, it's lower since then, partly because of the Bush tax cuts, but also a significant reason is, think about the economy in 2000. Lots of employed people, high incomes, lots of capital gains materializing, corporations running big profits and paying their taxes. So that's the highest it's ever been, in no small part because that was a real boom time for the economy.
And so, but see, to me, it seems like the better the economy, the tax working to pay off our U.S. for our U.S. government should happen that much earlier in good times.
That is the kind of counterintuitive thing here. And the reason it's not like that is, like I said, the progressive nature of the federal tax code. So if you're earning, $50,000, your tax rate, I don't remember the exact federal schedule off the top of my head, but your tax rate will be, say, 15%. Move up to $100,000, and you get bumped up to not just a higher tax liability, but actually a higher tax rate, which means that as national incomes rise, tax liabilities rise as well. And so cyclical changes in income have amplified effects on government revenues.
And so does your organization promote a fair tax or a flat tax, or do you not get into that? You just give us the information?
We don't advocate for specific legislation or candidates, but we do find that generally speaking, flatter income taxes cause less economic distortions than highly progressive ones. And broadly speaking, consumption taxes have fewer economic costs than income taxes. But especially, I work a lot in state tax policy, and there's no one-size-fits-all tax system. What works for one state might not work for another.
So, but a consumption tax, you think, has less of an economic impact than a income tax?
Yes, less of a negative impact in general.
Okay. And so Iowa, we have an income tax. We have property tax. The states around us, many don't have one or the other. And so what do you see in those states that maybe don't have an income tax or don't have a property tax? Are they better off? Are they growing? Are they recovering quickly?
I'm not extremely familiar with the recent economic history in the upper Midwest there. But I do know a fair amount about Illinois and its kind of ongoing saga where they also have all the major taxes, and they're currently debating raising their taxes. And I compare them a lot to Indiana, where it's a somewhat similar state that's been lowering taxes, and we find that over the last few years, as the Illinois taxes have gone up and Indiana taxes have gone down, that Indiana's recovery from the recession has been markedly more robust, both in employment and incomes, which to us is suggestive that taxes matter for economic outcomes, and low taxes can help support growth.
All right. And so, which seems to me, so when candidates and politicians talk about economic growth, when I'm not sure that that's the government's responsibility to get into that, but best tax situations is the best program they can have for economic growth. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Certainly, taxes are a major component of economic growth, at least as far as legislators are concerned. Many things that affect growth are kind of out of a legislator's power. You don't get to choose whether there's shale gas underneath your ground, or things like that. So some of that is out of their power. But as far as the levers that policymakers can affect, taxes are a very significant component. And we find that lower taxes and better structured taxes, it's not just how much you tax, but how you tax, can have a significant impact on economic growth. We're not going to say that if you cut your taxes, you'll suddenly have a bonanza recovery and all will be well in the world. But it certainly does contribute, and bad tax policy can really damage a state's economy and thereby ultimately injure its people.
All right. National date arrives 6 days after the deadline for filing. Louisiana's Tax Freedom Day is earliest, arrives March 30th, followed by Mississippi, April 2nd, South Dakota, April 4th. New Jersey and Connecticut are tied with the latest date of May 9th. They are preceded by New York, which is May 4th. What gives on some of those states? We sometimes think that Louisiana and Mississippi are needy states, or are what some people call empowerment states, maybe receiving more money back from the federal government than they pay in. Is that the case?
So these results can sometimes be a little counterintuitive to people, because when you see these lists, the first thing that jumps to everyone's mind is, state and local taxes. State tax policy in Louisiana is much lower than state tax policies in New Jersey. So that's one component, is differences in state tax policies. However, you're right to note that states are not all on an equal footing when it comes to how they relate to the federal government in that sense. So a consequence of the fact that nationally we've decided to have a progressive income tax is that there are geographical disparities in federal tax liabilities. Because we choose to tax higher incomes at a higher rate, states with lots of high income people tend to pay a higher tax, and vice versa. States with lots of low income people tend to pay a lower tax. So Louisiana and Mississippi have somewhat lower incomes, and so they're going to pay a lower tax. Another factor here, though, is not just the level of income, but the type of income. So we find that when you add up all the different taxes, that capital income or business income is taxed more heavily than labor income. So states that have lots of capital income, so think, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, things like that, are going to have much higher tax rates compared to states that maybe have more labor income or that are more rural.
Interesting. And I'm curious, Arthur Brooks did a study we talked about at the beginning of the year on happiness and how it may or may not be related to finances. Being rich wasn't necessarily a happy thing, but there were habits that rich folks did that might make them happier in general. I'm curious now with some of these states, with labor not being taxed as much, I'm curious what some of the high stress that would come with the other type of jobs, if maybe we're looking at things wrong, if we've geared our kids all the way through school so they can go to college, get a great job, so they can make great money, if we're kind of missing the boat there on a lot of these levels, which we look at on this show because we work on how we can live God's word in today's world and how the headlines impact us at home. But for your tax purposes, that's just probably doesn't figure in, but it's interesting to note. Coming back to this, we have listed, you've broken down the days that we're paying for things. 42 days we're working to pay off just our income taxes. And again, I'm sure there's a difference in what type labor that is, what bracket we fall into. But I would say on an average, you have 42 days we're working just to pay off our income tax.
Yes, indeed.
15 days, the excise taxes. Explain those excise taxes.
So the 15 days, we combine sales and excise taxes. So these are essentially consumption taxes of various kinds, though sales taxes tend to be, charged on pretty much everything. That most things you buy, you pay a sales tax. An excise tax is a targeted tax, so it's on, say, one type of good. So tobacco taxes, alcohol taxes, the special tax on tanning salons, the special tax on extraction of coal, the special tax on firearms. There's an 11% firearms tax. These types of things are excise taxes that they're essentially sales taxes, but they are specifically and narrowly applied to one or two goods.
Okay. And you mentioned that you thought the consumption was probably a better way to go than a higher income tax. My concern is if someone wanted to buy a car, then will there be such a high level of an income or a consumption tax, a sales tax on that new cars would be even more outrageously expensive than they are today?
So, we said that consumption taxes are broadly speaking, less distortionary. I should clarify, though, that we think excise taxes are highly distortionary because they're on one good, see. So we would say a broad consumption tax is good. But your question on, could the sales tax be so high that it discourages these things? Those are considerations to take into account. And like I said, there's no one size fits all tax code. There's broad principles that we can apply. And overall, in that circumstance, say the sales tax gets so high you can't buy that new car. Well, what does someone do with that instead? Well, they maybe they save that money, or maybe they spend it on something else. But it's not like the economy has just lost. It's not like the economy just loses that money, right? It either goes into savings and promotes investment and growth, or goes into some other form of consumption that person will value and enjoy anyways.
And so on your website, taxfoundation.org, I'm assuming people can find this handy little calendar that I got in a news alert. And if they want to sign up for the news alerts, I'm sure they can at taxfoundation.org. But the only one I think we have not mentioned is the 11 days then that we're paying for our property taxes. And you've got it broken down really nicely, color-coded, so people can see what federal income taxes, corporate taxes are, federal taxes, state and local income taxes. And, of course, do you have that anywhere on your website, state by state?
We do not have the historical Tax Freedom Day data state by state. Due to limitations in the data, we're not able to backcast it.
Okay.
But if you just want to look at a snapshot year of kind of shares of state revenue, sort of what forms of revenue is your state reliant on, we do have that on our website. We have a publication called Facts and Figures that you can look up that has all that information and much, much more.
Very good. And so today, if we include the federal borrowing, which represents future taxes owed, we would be working till May 6th. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we calculate this deficit inclusive Tax Freedom Day that is sort of a hypothetical number because, paying off future deficits is not strictly equivalent to tax increase today, but it is true. Someone will eventually have to pay for it. So we assume, if there had been fully balanced budgets, what would Tax Freedom Day be? And this year, it'd be May 6th, which would make the national average about equivalent to one of the latest states in the union.
Okay. What would you say our listeners, our viewers, need to be thinking about as we head into campaign season, but as also just as taxpayers, as the burden bearers of our financial state nationally? What do we need to be thinking about? What would you want people to be reviewing, considering?
The reason that we do Tax Freedom Day is because there is an important and ongoing debate in our society about the role of government. And when we have that debate, some people want more, some people want less. There are valuable arguments to be had about what that role is. But before we can have that discussion, we need to have a common understanding of where are we now? What does government cost today? And sometimes, when we explain that in, X billion dollars or Y% of GDP, it seems like you need an economics degree just to participate in the public discussion. And so our goal is to communicate the cost of government, kind of a where are we now picture, in a way that helps taxpayers, citizens, policymakers, and other stakeholders, that helps them clearly understand what is the cost. So we take the amount of taxes paid and we put it on the calendar. Another way we do it is we compare it to other things you spend on. So, for example, in 2014, Americans are going to spend $4.5 trillion on taxes. That's compared to $4.3 trillion on housing, clothing, and food. So we're going to spend more on government than all our basic necessities. And maybe that's too much, maybe that's too little. That's something, that's kind of a value judgment that a lot of people are going to have to decide on their own. But it's just important for people to keep in mind a clear understanding of the cost of government and ask, are you getting what you paid for?
Absolutely. And as we spoke with Deborah Thornton in our first half, how efficient is your government? That's what will make the difference. But I like the way you said that, Lyman. If we take the trillion off of there, you're spending more to fund your government, the bureaucrats of the government, than you are for your own, what did you say, home, food, and clothing?
Yes.
That's huge. Now, are cars included in that as well?
No, automobiles would not be included.
So just home, food, clothing. The three staples. All right. Well, we are out of time. Lyman Stone has been my guest. If you want more information, you want to find out more on your tax situation, you can go to taxfoundation.org. Lyman, thank you very much for dropping in and joining us today.
My pleasure. It's good talking to you.
Thank you. We'll be right back after these messages. I am Tamara Scott with Truth for Our Time. We're powered by webcast1live.com. Joining us should be Jenny Beth Martin. She is on messaging, talking about what do we say in the campaigns? How do we lose? How do we win? She's from the Tea Party Patriots. She's a co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. We'll look forward to hearing from her and the event happening here April 12th, this Saturday in Des Moines, Iowa. Stay tuned.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershide.
I'm administrative manager
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me. But is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
And good day. Thanks for staying with us. I am Tamara Scott. Truth for Our Time is what we give you during this hour, helping you live God's Word in today's world, but also helping you when the headlines hit home. How do they impact you financially? How do you handle that? And biblically, what are the right things to do as well? Joining me now is Jenny Beth Martin. Jenny is with the Tea Party Patriots. She's a co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots. And so we welcome Jenny. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tamara.
First, we want to let people know we have an event this Saturday, April 12th, at the Airport Holiday Inn. And what time does that start?
That starts, registration is at 8 a.m. and the event starts at 9 a.m. And we, Tea Party Patriots, are going to be going over some polling results and messaging and training people on how to go and talk about the values that the Tea Party cares about: personal freedom, economic freedom, and a debt-free future. And we hope your listeners who are interested in learning more about Tea Party Patriots will join us on Saturday.
And the cost is only $20. You can go on to Eventbrite, Tea Party Patriots, and pursue your American dream. The tour is in Des Moines, only $20, Airport Holiday Inn. And of course, we're so thankful for Greg Benghazi Cummings for helping us hook up with you and get this interview. And I plan to stop by, if only for a short time that day. There are 4 other events that I need to attend as well, but I want to hear your portion, Jenny. You're going to talk to us about messaging. What is it that, I mean, we lose elections. We lose elections on the verbiage that is selected and heard in a soundbite. What is it about messaging?
Well, you're right. We do win elections based on the verbiage. And as we watched in 2012, and the Tea Party supporters around the country watched in 2012, as the Obama campaign talked about a war on women and took the things that we cared about and language that we cared about and twisted it to talk about it with their values, we realized we want to be better at conveying what we actually care about and not having the language that we know we stand for: personal freedom, economic freedom, and a debt-free future, used by the left against us. And a lot of times what we were doing before the last several months is we would talk about our values in terms of fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, and free markets. And we still stand for those core values. They're still our core values. And we've gone through and said, how can we talk about this in a way that people, the average American, actually understands what we mean when we say fiscal responsibility? That is a tricky phrase even to say. And then people want to know, what do you mean by that? Well, what we mean is we want our country to pay its bills so our children and grandchildren aren't stuck with the bills. We want to have a government that has a debt-free future in store for it. And when we start talking in a way that Americans understand what we're saying, we know they will agree with us. We know that Americans want the same things we do for the country by and large. And we want to make sure they understand that we share the same values, we share the same principles, we want the same vision for our country, and this is the way we want to talk about it so that we can convey that, and they'll agree with us and hold elected officials accountable the way that we do.
And so if somebody, we have different philosophies of how we care for the poor, how we care for the hungry, and constitutionally what's allowed for the government to do versus what private folks are supposed to do. And that's the difference. If somebody wants to do that, they can do that with their own private funds. But the more money we have, the more we get to choose how we best control that, who we give to, who we help, and it should be ours on an individual basis. And Jenny, I'm curious, because as you were saying that and talking about the messaging, I'm looking, Governor Huckabee was here last evening, gave a wonderful presentation, talked about some of the issues of government. And here's the response from Democrats in Iowa. Women don't need Republicans like Mike Huckabee to patronize the choices that we make when it comes to their personal health or providing economic security for their families. That's Heather Mattson, vice chairwoman for the Iowa Democratic Party. I had to laugh, because you brought up the war on women. It was Democrats who brought up the fact that the government should be paying for, of all things, their birth control.
The Democrats absolutely did that. And as we watched this in 2012, and as it started unplaying from Sandra Fluck talking in front of an informal hearing in Congress about wanting free birth control while she's in law school, to what we saw in front of the Supreme Court and then the Democrat National Convention, I kept thinking, a war on women, as a woman, I don't need the government I want to be able to take care of myself, and I want the personal freedom to make those choices myself. I don't want the government going in and buying my health care and determining what kind of birth control I need or don't need. And that actually, what they say that we're trying to do is the exact opposite of what we're doing. So we've tried, a lot of people on the center right have said we need to message differently and talk differently. What we're trying to do is say we agree, we want to convey our values in a way that average Americans understand, and we want to show you how to do that and help you do that, not just tell you need to do it, but let's roll up our sleeves and talk about how we can actually make this a reality.
And Jenny's right. Exactly what they say is usually the opposite of what they plan to do. I think because they know what they plan to do wouldn't sell with the American public. But for years, the left has been saying, stay out of my bedroom. Only now they're welcoming you, saying, welcome to my womb, and pay for the activities there. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's just a disconnect from me. Now, Jenny, in 2010, we saw an uprising. We saw a grassroots organization In fact, the Tea Party is so independently minded, it's hard to know who's in control. You're a co-founder of Tea Party Patriots, but there are other Tea Party groups out there. But what we saw, even without a top-down leadership structure, we saw a unity and a people, we the people, rising up after Rick Santelli said that statement on the floor of the exchange, and it made the news and it went viral. It was such a fresh, refreshing, I hate to even call it organization, because it was just an independently minded uprising of people coming together. What was the message that struck that year?
Well, in 2009, when Rick Santelli was talking, what struck is the fact that the government was spending more money than it could afford, and people around the country were looking at the TARP bill from 2008 and the stimulus bill and the bank bailouts, and we were saying enough is enough. Stop spending our money to bail out these failing companies. Stop spending the money I worked so hard to earn to bail out these other companies. And then we watched as the government began to take over our health care and pushed and pushed and pushed and passed a bill that the majority of Americans did not want. And we were unified in 2010 on repealing Obamacare. And now in 2014, we're seeing that a lot of the predictions we made about Obamacare in 2010, and a lot of our concerns about it are indeed coming to fruition now. And we're saying we want health care freedom. We want to make sure that we can choose what kind of health care we need, what's the right health insurance for our family, and that the government isn't going to tax us or penalize us because we don't need or want something they insist that we should have. And we want to be able to have high quality health care. And we're very concerned about the quality of our health care in the coming years as the government controls more and more portions of it. We want to have health care freedom and make those choices on our own. And so that's what I think will be uniting us as we move into the fall. And of course, Americans around this country look at the fact that we're $17 trillion in debt, over $17 trillion in debt. That means that each family across this country owes, their portion of that debt is over $50,000. We know we have to, it's only fair and right to pay that off so our children are not stuck with the bills that our generation has incurred. We want a debt-free future, and we'll continue to focus on that. And I think healthcare freedom and a debt-free future will unite us as we move into the elections at the end of this year in 2014.
I hope you're right, because we missed that boat in 2012. I don't know what happened, but we couldn't seem to come together or agree. Maybe we just didn't have someone we really could get behind, believing they would full-heartedly take on the debt and efficient government for us. But we need to make sure we can do that, because as you say, this $50,000 we need to pay, one, just because it's the right thing to do. It's just going to be more money if we don't get it paid. It's going to be that much more for our kids. The interest alone each day that we're racking up on our debt is phenomenal. And so folks can come to the Airport Holiday Inn this Saturday, April 12th, and I will get that information on the Truth for Our Time Facebook page, so you can look at it there. Jenny, where could people find you or your organization so that they can hook in and move along forward with you?
They can go to teapartypatriots.org. Again, that's teapartypatriots.org. And they can sign up to get updates on our email list. And we'll make sure that we communicate with you and let you know when we have training, like we're having in Iowa this weekend, and the other activities and events and issues that we're engaging in across the country.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I see out of your group, it's not that you're creating a hierarchy. It's not that you're trying to put people in positions of your party structure, but you're bringing this training to the grassroots so that they can have the messaging to talk to their neighbors across the backyard fence, their coworkers over the water cooler, friends across the backseat of the pew at church. Am I correct in that?
You are 100% correct in that. We know that the best messengers of the freedom that we all love and care about are each of us talking to our own networks. And we're doing everything we can to empower the people who support us so that we can go and spread the message further. And we know that we want a limited government, and we want local government to be empowered to make the best decisions for us locally. At Tea Party Patriots, we want to do the same thing and empower local people, because you know what works best in Iowa.
You absolutely do. So friends, don't shy away from those topics they say you should never discuss when you go to parties. Head right into them, politely, kindly, smiling, in love. Talk to your neighbors. As Mike Huckabee pointed out last night, I think he's absolutely correct. It's not that people don't want these things. It's that they don't understand what made this nation great. Our kids, K through college, are not hearing what made the Constitution such a powerful document, that it's the longest living document, what gives us freedom, what gives us liberty, the power of free trade that helps countries across this globe more than any foreign aid possibly could. So talk about these issues with your friends. You are the hope. You know, people are tempted to shut off the TV when those political commercials come on, but they'll listen to you. You have credibility. So politely, be informed. Webster says God grants freedom, liberty to those who are diligent to guard it. And this is our opportunity, our responsibility. You can get on board with the TeaPartyPatriots.org. Find more about the event at that website, I'm sure. April 12th, Airport Holiday Inn. This Saturday, you can go and be trained yourself so you can be a polite patriot with all your friends and neighbors. Jenny Martin, thank you for joining me today, Jenny Beth Martin. I am Tamara Scott. We've had a full show. You can find it at Tamara Scott Live at YouTube, and you can also always email me, Tamara Scott Live as well at Gmail, Tamara Scott Live at Gmail. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week to talk about education, savings accounts, school choice. And I am Tamara Scott. Be encouraged. Never be complacent.